Hey nerds, what's up? Today I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with you ranting about my 1-star reads. So this is every book I've rated 1 star since I started formally rating books. Previously I would just keep track on an Excel document of every book I ever read, but it wasn't until the end of 2019, early 2020 that I actually started assigning star ratings. So this is just the worst books I've read in the last 6 years. Now to be clear, some of these books are popular. So these aren't objectively the worst books. They are just the worst books to me. I don't actually have that many 1 stars because I'm pretty particular about giving a 1 star. I give a lot of things 2 stars when I really dislike them. 1 star kind of has to fit into 2 categories, which is 1, I found your book to have 0 redeeming qualities, or 2, it just made me so angry that it outweighed any possibility of redeeming quality. So I had a lot more 2 stars, but these are the ones that really shine at 1 star. So I've grouped them into genre, and I thought we would start with speculative fiction, since I'm guessing that's what most of you are most interested in, since that's mostly what I cover on this channel. So let's start off with a 1 star I actually read this year, which was Dead Astronauts by Jeff Vandermeer. Now, this was my first Vandermeer book, even though he's been on my list for a while, and I do feel like I need to explain how I came to possess this book to understand why I chose it as my first one. I actually picked up this book, I want to say about 3 years ago now, when I was visiting my best friend in Sacramento, and we went to a local bookshop, and I was looking at all their SFF, and the bookseller could see I was interested, and he was like, "Can I pitch a book to you?" And this is what he pitched to me. And I'm someone that if you take the time to talk to me about a book, I'm going to feel really guilty if I don't buy it. So I bought it. It was also incredibly expensive because it was one of those independent bookshops that's super expensive. And then it's out on my shelf. This year, I'm trying to make a concentrated effort to get through all of my physical TBR, which I usually don't have very much of. You know, I try to read everything I buy. I'm actually very close, by the way. I'm gonna probably finish it this year, and I feel very proud of that. The fact that a random person recommended me this book is crazy. I don't care if you like it, but it is a crazy recommendation to give to someone you don't know. This book was nonsense. It was utter nonsense. I feel like I'm pretty good at going with the flow on books. I'm never overly concerned about immediately understanding something or not letting the book cook a little bit, so to speak. But I literally finished this book and felt like someone just picked a bunch of random words and strung them together and said, let's call it a book. I feel like this is one of the books those hypothetical monkeys with 1,000 typewriters in a million years would type out the works of Shakespeare. Well, this was one of their failed attempts. Near the end of this book, I feel like there were some interesting connections that started to be made, but it was just too little too late. I really love dream-like quality books, and so like that wasn't the issue. I just felt that it was like a pretentious look at some of these qualities, that it wanted to be so high level and high mighty that it forgot that it needed to also like have a point and have a heart and make any sort of sense. I do not DNF books, you guys. I always force myself to finish a book no matter how much I'm disliking it. This was the closest I have come in over a decade to DNFing a book. I was so miserable reading it that I almost couldn't make myself get through it. It just didn't make any sense. It was nonsense, in my opinion. Yeah. Now, I have since discovered that this is a very low-rated book of Jeff Vandermeer, and I want all the Vandermeer fans to know that I would never judge him off his worst-rated book. So don't worry. I'm going to read his famous book. It's Annihilation, right? I am still going to read it. It does not scare me, so I will try him again, but this was bad. I did not like it. Next up, another book I read this year. What a great start. And that was Yesteryear. I already made an entire video about Yesteryear, so if you're really interested in my full thoughts, you can go there. But Yesteryear is the start of a pattern you're going to see in books I dislike, which is books that are trying to make a statement but do so with a complete lack of finesse or subtlety. And that is how I feel about Yesteryear. If you know nothing about Yesteryear, it is a novel that is attempting, I'm going to put that word in there, to satirize the recent trad wife movement, particularly the trad wife movement as it applies to influencers. And it's supposed to delve into the different aspects of that. I thought it was a complete failure as a novel. I think if this was presented at just like as a funny novel and wasn't trying to satirize anything, I mean, it was compared to books like Kindred by Octavia Butler. I think I might have had more pity for it. Like, it might have been a 2 stars because it is so readable and it is so fast-paced. But I felt that it always took the easy way out and really had nothing to say. It did not try to understand its character or its character's viewpoints, and thus really didn't make any sort of point, because you can't really make a political statement or a political point without finding truth in the subject matter you are studying. And if you are only making it to deride it and never understand how someone gets there, you really can't ever present something that feels authentic. And I think this happens a lot in books I've read recently because, and I don't know if this is the case with this author, but authors fear being misunderstood and fear that if they attempt to sympathize with a character they disagree with, it is the same as them agreeing with that. And it's just very clear that the best writers know how to sympathize with their villains because no one's a villain in their own story. And so this book ended up just reading so silly and frankly dumb to me that it just made me angry and I hated it. Okay. Another SFF book I rated 1 star was Hunter's Run, which was written by 3 authors, one being George R. R. Martin, who you guys know is my fave, and also Gardner Dozois and Daniel Abraham. Now, I buddy read this with a few friends. I've only read George R. R. Martin's other works, but my friends have also read Daniel Abraham's other works, and we all decided that it can't be their fault that this book is that bad, so we're putting it all on Gardner. We're just pretending it's all him. Guys, this book was terrible. It had so much male gaze in it, and I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, George R. R. Martin is known for some male gaze. However, it was not his flavor of male gaze at all, and it's particularly noticeable because all the female characters completely sucked. They were so dumb and one-dimensional, and George R. R. Martin has never written a one-dimensional character in his life. He wouldn't know how to do it. So it was like the double whammy of male gaze and also terrible female characters. And also the main character was so insufferable. It was almost like male gaze, male character, where you're just like, ooh, this is what you think is deep and interesting as a character, but really is just the worst human being on earth. And you can tell by the way the story is written that you are not supposed to think this character is the worst person on earth. I'm gonna tell a quick spoiler. Yeah, so skip if you really think you're gonna read this book. The funniest part is that in Act 3, our main character basically has to meet a body double of himself through some shenanigans. And so then you have 2 of the worst person you've ever met. And it gets even worse. Self-indulgent, dumb, not a good plot. You notice I didn't even explain what it was to you because I've literally tried to scrape it from my minds. Yeah, that was the worst in my quest to read all of his books, and I'm just not claiming it as a Martin book. Okay, next is a book I'm sure none of you have read. I would love it if one of you have read this. This was a Book of the Month book that I got before I realized that most of the Book of the Month fantasy picks just aren't very good. Actually, that's not fair. That's not fair. I got Piranesi from a Book of the Month, which is my favorite book of all time. I just noticed a pattern that they weren't the kind of fantasy I tended to like. And that is Darling Girl by Liz Migalski. I feel like I said that wrong and I'm sorry. So Darling Girl is a Peter Pan retelling, but a dark Peter Pan retelling, which people love to do, by the way. They really love to do a dark Peter Pan retelling. This one is so interesting because it is incredibly dark and deals with incredibly serious subject matter, but despite that, the whole thing just seems incredibly silly. This follows Wendy's granddaughter, and that granddaughter has a daughter who has been in a coma for a long time, and then she goes missing and she knows Peter took her, but she knows actually that Peter is dark and manipulative. And it just reads like a Lifetime movie. And here's the thing. I used to love watching Lifetime movies with my best friend in high school because they're ridiculous and they're hilarious. But I don't usually choose to read stuff like that. So it was really hard to take this book seriously, and I kept laughing out loud at stuff that I should not be laughing at. Like, this is not funny stuff. I'm talking about assault. I'm talking about drug abuse and all of these things that are very serious, but they are done in such a stupid way that it's just, I mean, literally would make a great Lifetime movie. So I think some people would love this book. Do you know what I mean? The people who love those stupid kind of dark, not really a romance. No, not a romance, but dark, retelling, moody kind of thing would probably love this. I am totally not the audience for it. I actually read this with Leanna's library because we both had Book of the Month at the time. She actually might still have it. We laughed our entire way through this. Weirdly, one of the funniest parts of this book to me, if I remember correctly, I think the granddaughter of Wendy Darling, they have a makeup company, like a skincare company, because they are using fairy dust from Neverland, like that helps people keep the eternal youth, which I thought, again, lifetime plot right there. Girl owns skincare company. So I've read a few Peter Pan retellings, and I love the original Peter Pan, and I find that none of them seem to truly understand the thematic elements of the original Peter Pan. And this one claims it does, but it doesn't. So I will say this one, though, the thing about this book is this was a super fun 1-star read. Like I finished this in a couple days because it was so stupid. I kind of wanted to know what happened next. So this is definitely a lesser 1-star than some of the other ones just because it was so fun in its stupidity. Next up is The Future of Another Timeline by Annalee Newitz. Now, this was actually one of my very first reviews ever on here, so I do have a full review on it. Cannot promise it's the best YouTube video because I was just starting out. This one is actually one of those 1-stars that's a huge disappointment to me because I still love the premise of it. I love when an author uses something they're very nerdy about, and Annalee Newitz said, like I think it was in either like a foreword or an afterword, that she's a huge geological science nerd, and so she wanted to make time travel and like a magic system based on rocks and geology, and I loved that part of it. I love when you get to see that and an author shine through their works in a very unique way. Unfortunately, that's where it ended for me. The Future of Another Timeline is a time travel sci-fi book where it really is dealing with feminist issues and what can happen in the future if you try to erase certain rights for women or erase women in various capacities. There's a lot of different stuff going on, and kind of how these time travelers have to go, I think the group is called Daughters of Harriet, have to go and try to kind of save our future. And here's the thing. Again, this is the pattern, just no subtlety. No subtlety whatsoever, just really in your face and over the top about the examples in a way that makes it too removed from reality. Something can't scare you into action or feel like a good critique if it feels impossible that it would ever happen. And that lack of subtlety, it was like every villain was cartoonishly evil. And of course, cartoonishly evil people exist, but if you're gonna have multiple villains and multiple people working against you in a novel, you also need the people who slide by. You need the people who make it sound like they're doing everything in someone's best interest, because those people also exist in the world, and it ends up feeling kind of like the playground version of a villain when you see everyone from a mile off and everyone's constantly saying the worst possible thing they could ever say and making the worst possible decisions. It's like, well, that's just not how people are. So you end up having characters who feel very cardboard cutout. And in that same vein, there was a lot, there's something that I like to call checklist representation. I feel really guilty for saying this, but a checklist representation is when you feel like an author wants to make sure everybody feels represented in their novel. So they make characters and they give all of them a label. And I remember, I read this years ago, it was in 2020, so I might not get the perfect detail right, but I remember there's a scene where you're meeting the other Daughters of Harriet that are in this like special group, and you literally they're basically introducing themselves by, by the thing they're supposed to represent. And I get the want for that. I understand wanting people to feel included, but I don't think it's particularly inclusive if you don't give people personalities or make them real characters. Some of the best representation is when people get to be fully fleshed out three-dimensional characters, because people in real life are more than just a couple of labels. If you have a disability, that is not the only interesting thing about you. They live full lives with other interests. If you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, that is not the only thing about you. You're still a person. But when it gets boiled down to that kind of representation where that is the only thing about them, I don't actually think it's good representation. So yeah, this was just another one that made me really angry because it just felt frustrating and dumb when the premise seems so interesting. I just really hate books with lack of subtlety. The next one is one book I'm famous for disliking, which is The Last Wish, the first book in the Witcher series. I've already gotten enough hate for hating this book, so I think I'm going to leave it at there. I would recommend, if you really want to know what I thought about The Last Wish, you watch my second video on it when I read Sword of Destiny. I think that's the second Witcher book. I want to be clear, I've read 3 Witcher books now. I rated the second 2. So the Sword of Destiny and Blood Elves? Is that the first novel? I rated those 3 stars. And I rated The Last Wish 1 star. The Witcher is not for me. The Witcher is not for me. I'm sorry to say. Great character idea, great concepts. The way it's written is tough for me. Do I say I will? I just found The Last Wish incredibly sexist. I found it incredibly sexist, and I've been yelled at enough about that. You can say everything you want. It's just how I felt about it. I do think my second video explains more why I felt about it the way I did, so I would watch that one. I'll keep it at that. Next up is a book called The Alchemist of Loom by Elise Kova. I don't have a lot to say about this book other than I just think it was badly written. I did not like Kova's writing style at all. I felt like she thought the more similes meant it was good writing. So if you want it to be good, you just put an extra simile in. And it is a steampunk novel, but I felt like she really wanted to make sure you knew it was steampunk. So every description was so over the top steampunk, it kind of felt like a parody of itself. I guess she's really a popular author, so I feel bad, but I did not think she was a good writer. Okay, that was my SFF section. Next up, I have 2 literary fiction books. I feel like one of them they both are by authors that are often lumped into SFF, so I think it's fair to maybe also include them in this category, although the books themselves aren't necessarily SFF. So I'm tacking them onto the end, but it's kind of more literary fiction. And these 2 books are very, very popular books. The first is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. Now, before we get into this, I need to say that I am actually a Murakami fan. I read my first Murakami as a senior in high school, The Wild Sheep Chase, and if you watched my video about like influential books in my life, that was a hugely influential book. I mean, it really transported me. It's still a book that I consider very important to me. I've reread it. I love it. And it led me to read a couple other random Murakamis. None of his famous works randomly, but like, I think it was Night Shift. No, that's a Stephen King book. Oh, I can't remember what it's called. And a short story collection from him. Anyway, so I'm a fan of Murakami. I like his work. And I do know that Murakami has some male gaze stuff, has some objectification of women in his novels. But in the other novels I had read previously, it was kind of something that I could ignore. Like if a book is good enough and if an author does enough good things, there are things you can ignore. And sometimes, women are going to be objectified in books like that. And it's, I just get over it. Norwegian Wood was just on a new level. It was on a new level and I absolutely hated it. The main character has no personality, to the point. I also read this with Leanna's library. I swear we don't just read books we hate, but we ended up calling him Toast because he was so unmemorable. We were just like, Toast did another thing. And the weirdest thing is people kept trying to make excuses for this, like, well, he's such a listless character, he's so directionless. Murakami writes like that a lot. And it's like, yeah, Murakami does have a lot of characters like that in books I like. The difference here is how others react to this character. So it's totally fine if you have an aimless, listless character who doesn't talk a lot, who doesn't make any decisions, who has no agency in their story. Okay, that could be really interesting, but other people need to react to you like that's true. Instead, every woman in this novel thinks he is God's gift to women. They will like monologue at him and then be like, you're so interesting, everything you say is so great. And the main character hasn't said a single thing. And like, maybe you're like, oh, he's an unreliable narrator. Okay, it does not come across in an interesting way. And that's kind of the whole novel. All the characters just feel like caricatures, even the main character, of just nothing. And at one point, he meets a sexually liberated woman and she's just not a character at all. She is a walking sex joke. She literally does not make a comment unless it is sexual. And it's like, well, that's not a sexually liberated woman. That's just not a real person. It's basically one what the heck moment after one what the heck moment. The funniest part about this is that the only other Murakami I have ever read has all been magical realism. So when I was halfway through this novel and we were getting really frustrated by the lack of agency the character had, I told Leanna I was convinced that the main character was dead. That I was convinced he was dead. And I said, that will fix the whole book because he's actually dead. So all this stuff he's doing, the reason no character's reacting to him normally is because he's not actually there and he's envisioning all of it. So the reason he can never speak or have agency is because he's not alive. And we're gonna find out because the book deals a lot with suicide. And so at the end I thought that's gonna be what happened. Nope, there's no speculative part of this book. There's no magical realism whatsoever. So I ended the book and everything was real. You know how bad a book is if you think the book will be vastly improved if the main character is dead. Anyway, I don't like it. And I've had so many people write me think pieces about why I should like Norwegian Wood, and I just haven't agreed with any of them. I am totally okay if you love this book. Like I said, I am not a Murakami hater. I quite like him. This just did not work for me on any level. And again, we did a whole video on it, a little less traditional because it was like a live show we did, but you can go read all, people try to convince me, and no one has given me a convincing reason to like Norwegian Wood. The next book, drumroll please, I think is actually the worst book I've ever read, or I should say, my least favorite book I've ever read. We'll put it like that. It almost lost its place to Hunter's Run this year. So just to keep that in mind, Hunter's Run, that is The Circle by Dave Eggers. Now this could be maybe considered SFF because it is like more dystopian. I wasn't sure where to put it. This is actually the oldest book on this list, I believe. I read this back in 2019, and I read it for a specific reason, which was that the movie adaptation of the book was coming out, and it had Emma Watson in it, and I was a huge Emma Watson fan at the time, so I was gonna go see it, but then my sister and dad went and saw it, and they texted me to be like, that is the worst movie we've ever seen, do not go see it. And then it got panned by reviews. So I was like, I'm not gonna waste my time and go watch this movie, but you know what's always better than the movie? The book. And I was really interested because I thought the premise sounded amazing. It was essentially, the parable of the sower or 1984 of the tech world. It was really talking about tech surveillance and social media platforms and how that was affecting life. This is a brilliant concept that needs to be written well. Actually, someone tell me if this gets written well, because I think that is so present in our lives. And when this was written, it wasn't even as intense as it was now. So I was really excited to read this novel, and it was a horrible disappointment at every turn. I think I need to also mention that me and my husband at the time were living in Silicon Valley and working in Silicon Valley when I read this book, which I do think gives me a different feeling about it because I was living in the place that it was directly critiquing. And so it was even easier for me to see how stupidly it was critiquing things and how removed from actual reality and the real things to critique this novel was. Again, like I have stated with so many other books, this book just had zero subtlety. It took everything to such a silly extreme that I was laughing at things that were happening that were supposed to read as serious. Now, our main character, May, is somebody who just fully buys in to everything this company is doing, fully buys in to kind of the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And I think that is a really interesting main character to have. I don't always think your main character needs to be fighting the system. I think if anything, that can be a vehicle to do stuff. So that part wasn't my problem. I think some people complain that May doesn't have agency, but I think there is an agency in agreeing with the people around you. I think that could be possible. It had some shining moments of really subtle stuff, but otherwise, everyone in the Silicon Valley environment totally bought in to everything the company was doing. And as someone who has worked at a couple Silicon Valley companies, and my husband's worked at a couple Silicon Valley companies, and big companies, by the way, that these books were definitely based on, totally unrealistic. Actually, the higher you get in the tech world, the more suspicious of tech those people are. It seems ironic if you're not in the tech world, you think all these tech people are super tech enthusiasts. Actually, the biggest tech enthusiasts tend to not be the people who are deeply in it. The more you know, the way more suspicious you are of it. So I've already found it really inauthentic that nobody was questioning any of the decisions. I feel like you needed that in the novel to show why people would be upset. The only people upset about it were like the country people, the in the right country bumpkin kind of thing, who live outside the city and are away. And it's so extreme and so caricature-like that it really misses how insidious this stuff can be, because again, it's not actually interacting with it on a nuanced level. So one part I really liked is at one point, May wants to get her parents on her excellent health insurance, but all the health insurance have denied them because her dad has a pre-existing condition. And I can't remember what it is. It might be Parkinson's. It's something like that. And her new company, who's like this oversight company, is like, yes, we can totally get them on your health insurance. The only requirement is that we have to put cameras in their house because we do that to keep them safe and healthy. And this was like a one moment I loved because people don't have access to health insurance in our country and it's really, really expensive. And you could totally see why a character would give up freedom and would give up privacy in order for safety. I think that is a very interesting thing. And so it was like in that moment, I actually understood why our characters would do that. That is removed from every other part of the book. Like every other part of the book, they'll be like, hey, can we surveillance you all the time? And they're like, yeah, I don't see any problem with that. And it's like, well, normal people do. They just slowly get lulled in. And so without that, the whole thing just felt so silly. I predicted everything from like the first thing. Oh, and her ex-boyfriend, he's one of the like the in the right country people. Also just so over the top, like pure, like I'm in the right. And you're like, what are you talking about? I don't even feel like I'm doing a good job of how dumb it was. He was an artist and he was making, I think, antler chandeliers. It's been like 6 years since I read this book. He was making antler chandeliers and he like makes one for her family and it's so beautiful. She snaps a picture of it and shares it. And he gets furious. Like, my business is just for the people around us. It's not for the world. I don't want fame. I don't want money and people doing orders. And you're like, it's your business. I feel like it's not crazy to share a picture of someone's business. And maybe you're like, oh, maybe I've drank in the Kool-Aid. I'm just saying, I think it would have made more sense if she like shares a moment of them doing something together. And he's like, why does everything have to be shared all the time? I feel like I'm not doing a good job of how silly and over the top it all is. May just isn't a convincing person to have ultimately, because even if they buy into it, normal people do have reservations about things and she has none. So it felt like Eggers couldn't write a story in which he really explored the danger of this stuff in a legitimate way because he didn't actually know how to accurately argue against it. So he just didn't have any of his characters do that. And so, yeah, I just hate a book with lack of subtlety. May was a dumb character who did stuff no person would ever do. It ends up not really having a point. And it just felt dumb. I do have one nonfiction I rated 1 star. That's crazy. I never rate nonfiction 1 star. I did talk about this, ranted about this in my end of the year last year. It is the book Fast Like a Girl. It was a health book about intermittent fasting. I am an intermittent faster, so it's nothing against that topic. This book was full of pseudoscience in the worst possible way. Please run away. It will give you a major problem with disordered eating. It's not science, not written by anyone in the medical field. Don't do it, run away. Okay, and my last category of 1 star reads is in the romance category. So I'm not a romance reader. I do not like romance. I often don't like romance subplots in my regular stories, but I do like to try things and you can be surprised. After all, I didn't think I was gonna like A Song of Ice and Fire. I liked the opportunity to be wrong. So first, one of my people in my In Real Life book club chose a romance, which was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. And I was excited to read it because it was going to be my first honest to goodness romance with like no fantasy in it. Anyway, I hated it. She thought that was hilarious, by the way. Our book group is super chill. You can write things whatever you want. I felt like the only interesting part of the book, which was like her abusive family, is literally never explored. It's just kind of put in there, and the romance is dumb. The simple bumpkin life who's a huge artist, and you're like, okay, it's just so typical. That's what it was. It was so typical. And like, why would he like her? I want them to have a connection. Like any romance I've ever liked, they have a friendship connection, they have an intellectual connection, and just here, there was nothing there. I just couldn't get behind it. I was bored, I didn't like it. So after I finished that and I hated it, I had a couple friends from the book community be like, you need to try an Emily Henry book because she's really popular right now and she does it really great. I was totally open to this because I've heard so much about Emily Henry and I'm like, let's do it. So they sent me an Emily Henry book and I gave it 2 stars. We're not talking about that today. And then they were like, well, no, you read the wrong. Someone else was like, no, you read the wrong Emily Henry book. They sent me Happy Place and I gave Happy Place 1 star instead. Now here's the important thing to know about this. If I had read these in different order, let's see, what was the one I read I want to say the first one I read was Beach Read. If I had read Happy Place first and then Beach Read, I think Happy Place would have gotten 2 stars and then Beach Read would have gotten 1 star. So I think they're kind of interchangeable. What happened is I realized those 2 books were the same book. They were the same book with different clothing on. Beach Read was a bathing suit and Happy Place was sweatpants. Do you know what I mean? It was the same book in just a different environment. The characters were practically the same. The acts and when people get together and don't get together were exactly the same. It all felt contrived and trite. Ultimately, what I started discovering about the reason I don't like romance is that typically in what I read very grounded human characters and human experiences in fantastical environments, whereas romance is the exact opposite. Romance is grounded environments with fantastical character interactions. And that helped me really understand like why someone would love romance novels. That really helped me. It was like, oh, I get it. You love that it isn't in reality. You love that everyone is witty all the time and are saying things you would kind of never say in real life. And I realized that's just not what I like in a novel. I really like the more grounded exploration of the human condition. Just with dragons. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like that's kind of my main issue with romance, other than I'm also just like not a very romantic person at heart. And I think that just harms it. So the last romance is a romantasy, which was Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. I read that with John from Talking Story because we wanted to try a romantasy. He liked it a lot more than me. I 1-starred it. Hated the main character, hated the love interest. I'm not into the dark, broody shadow daddies, whatever, not intimate. Yeah, didn't work for me. We had a whole live about that, so you can see it. We did try another romantasy, and we should have filmed it last night. So it's either out, or if it's out, I will put it up here. Yeah, that one wasn't for me. Okay, those were all my 1-star books. I'm sorry if I made you really mad or sad or upset. I'm sorry. You can totally defend your book in the comment section below, or agree with me if I gave you some catharsis because you also hated the book. Yep. This is more negative and ranty than I've been in a while, so hopefully you enjoyed it and didn't hate it. As always, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me. I also just started a Patreon. It's brand new, so if you want to get a bonus video every month, as well as a couple other things that I'm doing over there, you can go check that out in the description box. If you want to see what I'm currently reading, as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews, and I'll see you next time. Bye.